The hum of the projector was a familiar counterpoint to my voice as I laid out the Q3 synergy projections. My name is Catherine Kate Sharma, and I was, until about 10 minutes ago, Senior Strategist for Acquisitions at Sterling Cross. Today, I was spearheading the final pitch to merge with an industry titan, Alistair Finch Group, AFG. The boardroom on AFG's 50th floor was opulent, all polished walnut and brushed steel, smelling faintly of expensive coffee and ambition. My boss, Richard Vale, head of corporate development, sat to my right, alternating between beaming at the AFG executives and nodding sagely at my points, as if he'd personally crafted each slide instead of just approving my late-night work. As you can see from the integrated revenue model, I was saying, gesturing to a complex chart I'd spent weeks refining, the combined entity stands to capture an additional 12% market share within 3 years. The key lies in the proprietary algorithm we've developed at Sterling Cross for client acquisition in emerging sectors, which, when coupled with AFG's established infrastructure, my laptop, connected to the massive screen, gave a soft ping. An email notification. I usually had notifications silenced during presentations, a cardinal rule, but this was my personal laptop, a habit I'd fallen into because Sterling Cross's issued machines were perpetually outdated. A quick, almost imperceptible glance down. The sender, HR. The subject line, regarding your employment status. A cold tendril snaked its way up my spine, coiling in my stomach. It couldn't be. Not now, not like this. My voice faltered for a microsecond, a slight crack in the confident cadence I'd maintained for the past hour. Richard shot me a sharp, annoyed look. I ignored him. My finger hovered over the trackpad, then, with a strange sense of detachment, I clicked. The email was brutally concise. Dear Ms. Sharma, this email serves as official notification that your employment with Sterling Cross is terminated, effective immediately. Further details regarding your separation package and exit procedures will be provided by close of business today. We thank you for your contributions and wish you well in your future endeavors. Signed by someone I vaguely remembered from HR onboarding, probably following orders. Future endeavors. The sterile corporate euphemism felt like a slap in the face. Fired. While I was literally in the process of orchestrating the single largest strategic move in Sterling Cross's history. A move Richard Vale would undoubtedly take full credit for if it succeeded. A wave of icy calm washed over the initial shock. I could feel the eyes of the AFG executives on me, their expressions shifting from engaged interest to mild confusion at my sudden pause. Richard was now openly glaring. He probably thought I'd lost my train of thought, a rookie mistake. I truly looked at him for perhaps the first time in months. His smug anticipation, the way he'd subtly minimized my role in preliminary discussions with AFG, the casual theft of my ideas repackaged as his strategic insights. He'd been maneuvering for this, hadn't he? To get me out of the picture once the heavy lifting was done, ensuring he alone would bask in the glory of the merger. Firing me mid-pitch via email was a new level of cowardly ruthlessness, even for him. He likely thought it would destabilize me, make me crumble, further proving his narrative that I wasn't senior leadership material. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. I reached forward and slowly, deliberately, closed the lid of my laptop. The projector screen went blank, plunging the far end of the room into relative dimness. A collective intake of breath. Richard's face went from annoyed to apoplectic. Catherine? What in God's name are you doing? He hissed, his voice a low growl. I turned to the assembled executives, my smile widening just a fraction, though I doubt it reached my eyes. Gentlemen, ladies, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It appears an urgent internal matter at Sterling Cross requires my immediate attention. You'll have to excuse me. Mr. Vale will, I'm sure, be able to walk you through the remaining projections. Without waiting for a response, I gathered my leather folio and my now closed laptop. I could feel Richard's murderous stare burning into my back. The AFG team looked utterly bewildered. I walked out of that opulent boardroom, the heavy door clicking shut behind me, with a satisfying thud. The something they didn't know, the reason for my faint, chilling smile, wasn't a piece of sabotage. It wasn't a hidden flaw in the deal I was about to expose. It was far simpler and far more devastating for Sterling Cross in this precise moment. For the past 6 months, I had been the sole architect and custodian of Project Nightingale, the internal codename for the entire merger integration plan. This wasn't just about financial projections. It was the granular, step-by-step blueprint for merging two distinct corporate cultures: IT systems, client databases, regulatory compliance frameworks, and operational workflows. It was a multi-thousand-line project plan with dependencies, risk mitigation strategies, and resource allocation models that existed in its most complete and dynamic form within a custom-built database application I'd designed. The slides I was presenting were merely the glossy high-level summary. The real meat, the actionable intelligence, resided in Nightingale. And Nightingale had several layers of security. More importantly, the most current, fully annotated version, the one containing the critical path analysis for the first 90 days post-merger, the very data AFG's due diligence team was scheduled to review starting tomorrow, was encrypted on a dedicated secure drive. The decryption keys? They were in my head and on a thumb drive currently nestled in my pocket. Richard, in his arrogance, assumed the PowerPoint was the plan. He'd seen the impressive charts and graphs, heard me articulate the synergies, and figured he could just pick up where I left off. He had no idea of the intricate back-end work, the delicate balancing of competing priorities, the subtle workarounds for legacy system incompatibilities that Nightingale addressed. He'd probably never even heard the code name. As I rode the elevator down, a genuine smile finally broke through. They hadn't just fired a strategist. They'd fired the cartographer who held the only complete map to their promised land. The walk to the subway was brisk. My mind was already racing, not with anger, but with a cold, calculating clarity. The humiliation of the public, albeit electronic, firing still stung, but it was quickly being overshadowed by the delicious irony of the situation. Richard wanted the glory. He was about to find out what it felt like to stand on a stage, under a spotlight, with no script and no idea what came next. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was already buzzing. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another, this time from Sarah, a junior analyst on my team, her voice frantic. "Kate, Mr. Vale is losing it. He can't find the main integration file, the one with all the timelines. He's asking everyone. What did you call it again? Nobody knows where it is." I listened, a grim satisfaction settling in. Later that afternoon, an official-looking courier arrived with a box for my personal effects, a sad collection of a chipped mug, a stress ball, and a wilted desk plant. Tucked inside was a letter detailing my severance. Standard, minimal, no mention of the merger. The real fireworks, I knew, would be with AFG. They were a notoriously meticulous group. They wouldn't proceed with a 9-figure merger based on a half-finished PowerPoint and vague assurances from a flustered executive like Richard Vale. They would demand the detailed integration plan, the risk assessments, the data migration protocols, all the things currently locked away, metaphorically speaking, in my head and in my pocket. My something they didn't know wasn't just about the files. It was also about trust. AFG had been impressed by my presentation, by the thoroughness and strategic depth I demonstrated. My sudden, unexplained departure, coupled with Sterling Cross's inability to seamlessly continue, would raise massive red flags about their internal stability and competence. Richard, in his eagerness to oust me, had inadvertently cast doubt on the entire acquisition. 2 days later, my lawyer, a sharp woman named Anita, who specialized in employment disputes and intellectual property, received a call. Not from Sterling Cross, but from Alistair Finch Group's legal counsel. They were concerned. The due diligence process had stalled. Sterling Cross was unable to produce critical documentation referenced in the initial pitch. There were inconsistencies. Anita and I had a very productive meeting. My employment contract was standard, but it didn't explicitly cover proprietary analytical tools and databases developed with a significant degree of personal initiative, like Nightingale, especially if key components were built on my own time using non-company resources, a habit I'd developed out of necessity. The encryption was mine. The specific architecture of the database, mine. Sterling Cross had thought they were just terminating an employee. They didn't realize they were terminating access to the very heart of the merger's viability. Richard Vail had wanted to be the hero of the AFG merger. Instead, he was now the architect of its potential collapse. My smile as I closed my laptop in that boardroom hadn't been about revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't planning to leak information or actively sabotage them. I didn't need to. I simply knew my worth, and I knew the critical importance of the work I'd done. I knew that by arrogantly and callously severing me, they had severed their own lifeline. They thought they were cutting me loose. In reality, they had just set themselves adrift without a rudder, a map, or a prayer of reaching their destination. And the best part? I didn't have to lift another finger. They had done it all to themselves.